Is in.
Well, I guess we better get on with it.
And we are getting on with it. Welcome to the Wednesday show. Glad to have all of you here. And, of course, today is Wednesday, the 27th of November, the day before Thanksgiving. And we're going to have a fabulous time. Now is a good time for you to like and share if you're on Facebook. If you're on YouTube, they don't let me broadcast live on YouTube anymore. So all I can ask you to do is give me a thumbs up. Make some comments below about how great the show is. And, of course, unless you don't think it's great, in which case, I don't know, make your own comments anyway. I don't delete comments. And the other thing you can do is subscribe to the channel, even if you don't like it, because then you can share it with your friends or your enemies, depending on how you're looking at it. And I see Montgomery County is already checking in. Welcome to the show, Sandy. Glad to have you on the show. And once again, class time starts at 1:08. Actually, it's 1 o'clock because I need you to hear the commercials to keep this show on the air. But if you miss that, 1:08 is the appropriate time to tune into the show. Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest. We have Brian Christ. He is running for Montgomery County Republican Party chair. That's a very important and prestigious commission, and so we wanted to bring him in and have a chat with him. Hello, Ginger. Good to see you. And Kelly Cook. Glad to see you as well. So welcome to the show, Brian.
Hi there.
I appreciate you taking the time. I mean, you drove all the way down to the studio from up there in northern Conroe.
I did, yes. Made the jog.
So the first question I have to ask anybody that would do such a thing, I mean, we all, well, maybe we don't all know, you don't really get paid to be a county chair, do you?
You do not. In fact, it's somewhat of a money-losing proposition, the whole campaign cycle, because anytime I'm not in front of the computer billing hours, I'm not making money. So this is just really just a service thing for me.
Well, I appreciate that, which means you're really burning money today because you had to drive time. Now you got the show time. There's no billable hours involved in this.
No billable hours, no.
So you're an engineer by trade?
Yeah, I'm an IT consultant. I've been doing, I'll just use the word technology. I've been doing technology for most of my life in some form or fashion. And so
you speak TCP/IP?
I speak all of that stuff. TCP/IP, C. I don't want to bore the listeners. We could rattle on acronyms all day long.
Well,
but yeah,
I know I've got some people out there that are also IT professionals, so
yeah.
they appreciate it. And the chaplain, Gypsy Robert, is checking in, and Irish Paula has checked in. Glad to see you in there as well, and Michael Couch, and the Bacon Master himself. So we got a lot of people up there that are interested in your race. So how'd you get in IT? That's sort of an odd profession.
Yeah, it really is. So let's try to keep a really long story short here for the sake of time. When I was 7 years old, I was in what was effectively, I think it was called Indian Guides. It was like pre-Boy Scouts.
Mm-hmm.
Went over to a friend's house. We had our little den meeting that night, and he had this thing called a computer. And you could type stuff in it, and things would happen, and that was just amazing to me. So for the next 2 years, I, raked leaves and mowed lawns and eventually bought my own computer. And then, as time progressed, I, just continued to find myself evolving into that field. At age 15, I wrote my first computer program that was published in a magazine at the time, and that was kind of neat. But yes,
you're younger than I am. So are we talking Fortran and COBOL, or a little later than that?
I think it was BASIC at the time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, I know enough about IT to be dangerous. And when I was learning computers, if it wasn't for my good buddy that was a compact engineer, he was my good buddy. And so he'd say, look, just go in there and mess with it. And call me when it doesn't work anymore. And then I'd call him up, and he'd say, what'd you do? I said, well, I deleted these 2 exe files because they're taking up a lot of space. And he said, you shouldn't have done that. That's what makes a computer run. So anyway, that's how I learned computers. I would dink with it until I broke it, and then he would help me get it back online again. And I think Windows had just appeared on the scene, but I was still doing, command line DOS stuff.
Oh, yeah. No, I cut my teeth professionally at Compaq. I was there for 95, which the joke was at the time that Windows 95 wasn't still out. It debuted in 96, and I didn't leave there until 2010. So
Well, if you knew a guy that was a veritable giant of a man, he was about 6'6". His name was Greg, and his job at Compaq at the time was making sure all the computers in the offices worked.
It was a big place,
but you couldn't miss him. It was a big place, and you guys had several campuses as well.
Oh yes, for sure.
Well, one of the questions in the chat room already is, what technology improvements could you bring to the Republican Party of Texas were you to become the Montgomery County chair?
Yeah, great question. So I've already sort of taken a look at that. I think there's some improvements that can be done in terms of, so there's a headquarters. I think there's an opportunity there to maybe reduce expenditures on the internet bill. I think there's some opportunities to reduce costs on the telephone bill. So I've started looking at that. But in the broader spectrum, when it comes to doing the work of the party, our church that we attend, they have a great piece of software that tells us when somebody new has moved into the area and maybe they're unchurched, and it allows us with some level of granularity to go out and say, hey, these folks just moved into the area, they're unchurched, we can reach out to them and connect with them and help them get plugged in. And so there's software that does the same thing at the voter level, right? So I think from a technology perspective, I'm going to be interested in seeing those kinds of solutions and how we could use those.
Well, I know that's we've got some software that does that. My problem is half the time when I try to log in, it won't let me log in.
Well, that's why.
And we spend a boatload of money on that software.
Well, that's why IT consultants have a job, right?
Yes. So it could have been made better than it perhaps was. So thank you, Kelly. So they're appreciating the fact we have video, not just audio. So anyway, you decided to run for this position because
I felt like I had the skill set to do so. So I've been an IT. I'm an IT consultant now. I've been in IT for a very long time. Part of my tenure at Compaq, a great part of my tenure at Compaq, and of course that became Hewlett Packard, was managing projects, right? So as a project manager, you obviously set these milestones, but with these milestones come challenges. How do you get from point A to point B? And so in many facets of that career, I was leading not just projects, but teams of people associated with solving those problems. And I think I can take that skill set that I have in tackling tough problems and doing it in a very agreeable way where I can bring folks together, put ideas on the table, and solve them collectively.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very important. And of course, being able to run a project is very important. Mm-hmm. I don't know the problems you particularly had in Montgomery County, but I can tell you that here in Harris County, the party has been an utter failure. There are, I think, only 2 Republicans still in elected office in all of Harris County. 4th largest county in the United States, 3rd largest city in the United States. We've utterly it's just been destroyed here.
Yeah.
So, what is the message for Montgomery County? How are we going to get more people involved in voting Republican?
So let me talk about the big picture here. I spent some time not too long ago sort of crunching some numbers, looking both nationally and the state level at what's going on. The Democrat Party has a significant lead over the Republican Party nationally in terms of voter registration. The good news is we seem to be making ground, but we're nowhere near caught up. So I think what really needs to happen is there needs to be additional pushes toward voter registration and voter outreach. Now, here's sort of the caveat with that, right? It's very easy to just categorically broaden the party if you're willing to sacrifice the character of the party, but you can't do that, right? So The Democrat Party, if you look at what defines them, they have these things that define the Democrats. And I'm painting with a broad brush.
Let's go ahead and lay out a couple of those things.
Sure,
I
yeah.
guess
Let's
number one, you can't, according to certain people, you can't be a Democrat unless you support the killing of babies for any particular reason,
right,
and no particular reason,
right.
So you can't be a Democrat unless you support that. How does that contrast with the Republican Party?
Yeah, so that's a great example, right? I categorically reject the notion of abortion. Life at conception is where I stand on that. In the Republican Party, in the platform, that is something that defines the Republican Party, the sanctity of life, right? And so when I say you've got to broaden the party without destroying the character of it, you can't sacrifice some of those core principles of the Republican Party for the sake of growing it. It's really important, and that's what makes it challenging. And I'd be glad to share more of that with you if you want to go down that route.
Well, here's the thing. I was talking to an Illinois Republican at the Harris County Republican Party last week. He came down here from Illinois to see what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Happened to be a black guy, and he pointed out, well, Illinois Republicans is a little different than Texas Republicans.
It's true, yeah.
And he had a moderate view on killing babies. And I said, well, what is the moderate view on killing babies? Do we only kill a certain number, or do we only kill ones that are of a certain skin color or ethnic background? And he couldn't answer the question. But I have to remind you, we're talking with Brian Christ. He's running for chairman of the Republican Party in Montgomery County. I have to remind you that after 18 years of complete Republican hegemony in Texas, we have not made any strides toward eliminating abortion in Texas, while a number of other states have.
Yeah, so I would say that I think we've made some strides. It's nowhere near where it needs to be. I'm going to probably be a little fuzzy on it, but a few legislative terms ago, there was, I believe it was SB 4. There was some legislation that was put together to restrict how abortion could be carried out. I believe it included things like requiring admitting privileges to hospitals.
Well, these were safety items. Whereas if you care at all about the life of the female involved here, the mother, we were simply saying that if you're going to operate a baby killing facility, it needs to be sufficiently well done that if the mother attempts to die during the baby killing procedure, that she could have her life saved.
Yeah,
and a lot of people got pretty excited about that. They said, wait a minute, why should these clinics have to be clean? Why should you have to be able to save the life of the mother in the event of someone dying on the table? Mm-hmm. But to be honest, Brian Christos, that to me, go ahead and have a seat over there. That to me is just common sense.
You would think it's common sense. I'm genuinely concerned about the direction of the country as a whole. When you look at what's going on in places like New York, where, there used to be this charade of, pretending in the Democrat Party that you cared about the sanctity of life. But in some of these states, they're just saying, hey, you know what? If the baby isn't born, it's fair game. And I'm looking at that going, my goodness, how far do you have to chuck morality to get to that point? It's deeply concerning.
Well, that's my point is, allegedly the Republican Party is the pro-life party, and yet after 18 years I've seen no significant movements that demonstrate that. It's kind of like the old adage, if you say you're a Christian and we're going to try to convict you of that, can they find enough evidence to convict? Mm-hmm. So, and in the case of Texas Republicans, I don't think you could find enough evidence for pro-life to convict them of being pro-life, being frank.
It is a sad state of affairs that I think we should be farther along. We like to think we're Texans. We're proud. We like to think that we're a super conservative state. And I would like to see greater measures in Texas marching in the direction where we feel like they should be. So we have this idea of where we think we should be, but the reality is far from that. And I'd like to see us make greater inroads in that direction. And sadly, we're not anywhere close to where I think most Texans would like to be, most Republicans would like to be.
Well, these are some concerns of mine. Now, something else that's very interesting that happened up in your county recently. They made a move toward creating a Second Amendment sanctuary county.
Yes.
Your thoughts on that, Brian Christ?
I think it was great. I think that I don't know. Is it okay for me to get on my soapbox a little bit here?
You had the mic. You drove all the way down here.
Yeah,
you had the floor, sir.
So before the show started, you and I talked a little bit about red flag laws, and I recently on my website just kind of dumped my thoughts into an article on red flag laws. But when it comes to the Second Amendment, I'm a huge fan of somebody's right to hunt, fish. I'm a huge believer in the right to defend your person. But if you look at the history of the Second Amendment doesn't really have anything to do with that. The Second Amendment
doesn't have anything to do with hunting.
Doesn't have anything to do with hunting. It doesn't have anything to do specifically with personal protection, although I think you can make the case that it's at least tied to it.
Well, if you want to protect yourself from perhaps a tyrannical, overreaching government.
Exactly. So that's where I'm going, right? Like, so if you look at the Second Amendment, I think there's some things that if you put yourself in the mind frame of the founders of the Constitution, the authors, they just came out of a revolution, right? And when they were deprived of their firearms, they couldn't deal with a tyrannical government. I also think it's interesting.
Course, the Lexington, the shot allegedly heard around the world. What was that fight about? What did they come for?
Exactly, right? And I think another interesting...
And that was really, they didn't really come for our arms. They came for our ammunition to get our powder and shot.
And if you look at what's happening with some of these laws across the country, these states doing things like restricting the amount of ammo you can have in a clip, or even what kinds of firearms, it's really just another way to attack the Second Amendment. I also think it's, if I may, I think it's telling that most people don't talk about the Third Amendment. Most people don't even know what the Third Amendment is, right?
Well, I'm not too worried about the Third Amendment right now, but I'm glad that it's in the Constitution, because the time may come. And the Third Amendment is the requirement that you house government troops and feed them and give them a place to stay in the event of a wartime issue. And that was what King George was doing. He's bringing his troops over here and saying, "Okay, Mr. Jones, you're going to have to take care of these. Give these guys a bed and food, because they're going to be with you for a while."
Yeah. So I like to look at it this way. So the First, Second, Third, and Fourth Amendment, they almost play out in a certain frame of mind. The First Amendment is the freedom of the press, right? The freedom of speech, right? So you take things like the Sons of Liberty, right? That were basically talking about the revolution. You have the Second Amendment, which was basically the tool to beat back the tyrannical government. You have the Third Amendment, which again I think speaks to their mindset, which is this is what happened during that period, right? And then you put that all together and you think, well, this is what the Second Amendment was. This is the context of it. And so I talk to people about this and say, oh, well, that's just absolutely ludicrous to think that that's what the purpose of the Second Amendment is. Most people don't know the
public
story.
School has done its job.
Yeah. So most people, you probably do know this, but just for the sake of the audience, if you don't know what the Battle of Athens, Tennessee is,
we've talked about that.
Take a look at that
very frequently on this show,
okay.
And we may be approaching the time. A little different situation, but we, they tried to stuff the ballot box and deny the voters their opportunity to vote.
Yeah,
and that ultimately ended up with people being shot, and the people grabbing arms and going down there and saying, "No, we're going to have a fair and honest election." First guy shot happened to be a black guy, by the way, that was there to vote.
Yep.
proving once again that Democrats are racist. But I digress.
Well, and just my point there is, the way that they dealt with that corrupt, it was really a cabal. It was a cohort of both the sheriff and other members, elected officials of the city that were doing this. And the first thing that the GI party did when they learned about all this is they ran off to the armory to get the weapons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that was key to dealing with this microcosm of this tyrannical government that was out of control and was going to suppress the voice of the people.
Yeah, which is going on right now. So
all of that was to say, do I think that a proclamation that Montgomery County should be a gun sanctuary? Yeah, I think it's great.
Well, the reason why I think that's important is, once again, in this last legislative session, one of the things that we discovered was that Republicans with complete hegemony could not legalize the Second Amendment in Texas. Republicans in the Pink Palace decided that Texans just could not be trusted with that kind of power.
You're talking about the constitutional carry.
Yes, because that's what we're talking about. Constitutional carry is legalizing the Second Amendment in Texas.
Right.
Texas is in complete violation of the Second Amendment. And the Republicans seem to have no interest in restoring that. So I was glad to see that in Montgomery County, somebody would come out and make such a proclamation. But, you can go to any one of our surrounding states. You don't need a permit in those states to carry a weapon or to purchase a weapon. Yeah,
again, this is one of those issues where I think we have this idea of what we think Texas should look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then when you look at the reality of it, there's distance between reality and what we think it should look like.
So, which organization is most effective? Texas Alliance for Life, Texas Right to Life, the Republican Party of Texas, the Freedom Caucus. Are any of those in your eyes effective?
I think they all have their place.
The Freedom Caucus kind of let us down, I think.
So when I start thinking about the Freedom Caucus, I really think about what happened at the national level. The Freedom Caucus caved on a number of key things. I specifically remember during the healthcare debate, Obamacare, that really was a bit of a letdown. And I've seen that in
because the Republicans were exposed for the liars that they are. They said, we want to get rid of Obamacare, and then when the time came and they had a president that would sign it, they didn't have a bill.
Yeah.
Not unlike what the Republicans are doing here in Texas when it comes to banning abortion, which has already been done now in several states.
Well, and I think so. Again, I try to. So I think if I'm looking in my typical sphere of influence, I don't get challenged very often on pro-life. One of the things that people don't know about Montgomery County, the metric may have changed slightly, but I think the statistic is we're like the 5th or 6th most conservative county in the entire nation, right? So in Montgomery County, we live in a little bit of a bubble because when we go to the polls, the question is which conservative are you going to vote for? Like typically by the time the Republican primary is over in Montgomery County, the general election is really just kind of like you're just going through the paces because the Democrat's not going to win.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start talking about these kinds of policies,
I wouldn't get comfortable though because we thought in Harris County too.
I understand. You cannot let your guard down. But I'm just what I'm letting you know is in my sort of sphere, it's hard to find people within the Republican Party that I don't agree with on key issues, things that are fundamental constitutional issues. Pro-life people, people I know, they want to end abortion. The people I know are pro Second Amendment. They don't think that the government should be interfering with your right to bear arms.
All right. So when does life begin?
I'll tell you when life begins for me, and I use this argument. I'll share this little argument that I used with Democrats. I actually get an opportunity to do this every once in a while because of the career circles that I travel in.
Mm-hmm.
So the question, first of all, when you look at the topic, I think that there's sort of this subtle.
Well, give me the quick answer.
Yeah, let me give you the quick answer.
Because I'm going to have to hit a commercial here, and I only got you for an hour. So.
Okay, so let me do this. Let me say this. So there was a point in Obama's campaign where he said, "Oh, that's question. When does life begin is above my pay grade." What I think that most people don't realize is he was actually right on that. And let me tell you why I say that. If I come to a Democrat and I say, let's have a conversation about abortion, but let's keep religion and philosophy out of it. They chomp on that. They say, yeah, absolutely. Let's just deal with science. I say, okay, let's talk about biology. So do you know what a haploid gamete is? No. Okay. Well, tell me what that is. Well, it's the sperm. It has 23 chromosomes. Let's talk about the egg, 23 chromosomes. But they're unpaired. When they come together and they pair, it's called a diploid gamete, right? That's actually viable human life. If I were to take that diploid gamete and I would send it to a forensic pathologist, I say, I'm not going to tell you where this came from, where I got it from. Just tell me, is this human life? They're categorically going to say yes. Now, at the moment
you would say life begins at conception.
I believe life begins.
Your opinion.
That's my opinion. And the moment I say that, they say, well, but that's not human life. Now, so what they're trying to do is now they've shifted that. So now they're trying to say, well, sentience matters, or consciousness matters, or all these other things.
Oh, but once you get into that,
but we've ruled that out. We said from the onset of the conversation, we're not going to deal with religion and philosophy. You want to have a conversation with me on religion and philosophy, I'll be glad to do that. But we took that off the table, right? And so they really don't like that predicament. So that's my shortened version.
All right, we got to hit a quick break. We'll be right back on right side of the mic, so don't go away, guys. Please support my advertisers. I need the money, and you need the show. About when he was preaching on Sunday, and he was talking about all the things in the world that could happen to you that are really bad, and he mentioned having an Android phone. So I completely agree with him. We're talking with Brian Chris, got him live in the studio. He is running for Montgomery County chair, Republican Party chair. Very, very important position. A lot of decisions are going to get made at that level, and it's very important that we get to them. So in the we talked about Second Amendment. We talked about being pro-life. I understand that there were some changes made recently to the bylaws up there in Montgomery County that had a tendency to decentralize power. Your thoughts on that?
Okay, yeah. So again, I've written pretty extensively about this. You have a blog? I've written about this on my blog, so you can go out there and check that out.
Okay, where is your blog?
BrianChris.org/blog.
All right, I'm going to get that up here while we're talking. Go ahead,
sure.
Brian.
Okay,
Chris.
So I understand from our audience that we want to try to keep things even shorter. So I'm going to do my best here. So what happened was every 2 years you hold an election for your precinct chairs and your chairman. Shortly thereafter, at the Republican Party level, so there's a set of bylaws that govern the Republican Party. There's a set of bylaws that govern the local chapter. And they call for the adoption of new bylaws. And where really kind of the rub here on that whole deal is that in order to adopt bylaws with a sort of a 50% threshold, you can only do that when you're forming a new society. Mm-hmm. And that's Robert's Rules of Order. Chairman Dickey. I have a letter from him where he basically refers to that, saying, hey, yes, this is what we're leveraging. We're leveraging this deal in Robert's Rules of Order that allows a new society to be formed.
In this case, 50%. The new society is what? The Republican Party of Montgomery County?
Well, because
that sounds like a big topic.
It's a really big topic, and I don't know that we have the time, and nor does your audience have the patience to endure that conversation. But let's cut to the chase. That you've got lawyers and parliamentarians on both sides of this particular argument saying, yes, these are legitimately adopted. No, they're not. I look at it and don't see anything in the Republican Party bylaws, in the bylaws of the the local chapter. I don't see anything in there that says that the former society was dissolved, that it went away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Robert's Rules of Order has prescription for that.
Okay, once again, the former society being the Republican Party
that local
Montgomery County.
Yeah, the CEC effectively is the County Executive Committee. So that particular entity, that set of bylaws never went away. And Robert's Rules of Order has a prescription for dealing with that. And most people doesn't really this conversation that it's a deer in the headlight. They're like, why does this even matter? To some extent, I would say the average person isn't going to care.
Okay.
And so.
Well, the average, we have patience. Please explain.
Okay.
That's in the chat room.
All right, okay, that's in the chat room. Okay, so if you look at some of the changes that the other set of bylaws, so I'll talk about it in terms of old and new. Mm-hmm. There are some really good things in the new bylaws. Mm-hmm. And I think there's room for improvement. I think if you look at I think you probably know who Dr. Wally Wilkerson is. He's the current.
Well, certainly the name has been bandied about.
Okay, and so
and I think he was like chairman up there for 75 years, something like that.
Yeah, like 50-something years, right? Like there wasn't a Republican Party in Montgomery County until he came along, and so he's sort of the he's the founder of that, right?
The Montgomery County Republican Party.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at the two sets side by side, I think you can say that there's some good stuff in the new bylaws. And the real rub, and I know that there was a meeting. So after all of this went down and there was disagreement about whether they were legitimate or not legitimate and all of that, there was an attempt to reconcile and say, hey, you know what? Okay, we get it. There's some disagreement. Look, can we just have a meeting to discuss this? And so a handful of folks that were in favor of some of the provisions of the new bylaws got together with Dr. Wilkerson, and they talked about that, and they had sort of a gentleman's agreement that we can work this out. Then they left that meeting and went back, and then for whatever reason it just fell apart. And so I try not to get too caught up in this. I've dissected it for the people that want to know. I try not to get too caught up in it. My approach, Lord willing, if I'm elected, is going to be real simple. There's a poem that says, things everything I need to know about life I learned in kindergarten, and it talks about just being cordial, talking in turn, those kinds of things. And so if I'm elected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite everybody that's a precinct chair to come to the table. We're going to put all the ideas out there. We're going to be respectful of each other. We're going to say, what do we like? What do we not like? Let's agree on that. Let's codify this. And then when we have the first CEC meeting, we'll go through the ratification process, and we're going to put this behind us. Because this is, in the grand scheme of things, this is not what we need to be concerned about. What we need to be concerned about is the encroachment of Democrats into Montgomery County. Mm-hmm. And, Jesus said this himself, a house divided against itself cannot stand, right? And so if we're sitting here bickering over this, and the Democrats make attempts to encroach into Montgomery County, we're not going to be prepared for it. So I don't have a grand plan. I just am going to go into this and say, can we just act like adults? Can we just act civil? Can we agree on what makes sense and what doesn't make sense and put it in the rearview mirror?
Okay. Well, I wanted to cover that because a lot of people are very concerned about it.
Sure.
The current chair made a mistake before. Is that correct? That's one of the questions.
He made a mistake. I mean, I'd have to know more about what that question is. I mean, if I asked him just in general, have you made mistakes? I'm sure he'd say, yeah, I've made mistakes, but I don't know exactly what's being talked about there.
Oh, Walter said he was chairman for 56 years. Okay, I overstated it a little bit. And I guess there's some question about candidates that have turned in their paperwork, but it still hasn't been updated on the SOS page showing candidates. But I don't know if that you have anything to do with that or not.
Yeah, I don't know how that. I'm sure those are turned in batches or something. I don't know.
Okay. Well, so we've covered the important things. So what is going to be the message in Montgomery County? How are we going to get people behind the Republican Party in Montgomery County?
Okay, so I think there's really three things that. So I alluded to this earlier. I spent some time crunching numbers and saying, here's how we need to grow the Republican Party, but we need to do it without destroying the character of the Republican Party. And so I spent time looking at 3 specific segments.
Mm-hmm.
These are areas where the Republican Party is weak. One of them is the Latino community. We're not doing a good job getting the message out to the Latino community. As I've been on the campaign trail, so to speak, running the gauntlet, I've had a chance to meet a couple of individuals who have really strong outreach efforts to the Latino community. Again, Lord willing, if I'm placed into that position, one of the things that I want to do is foster those efforts. Let's get the message out. In fact, Alan West here recently put a video out talking about in his race. He's urging the Latino community, don't make the mistakes that the Black community made in thinking that the Democrats have the answers, because they don't. They sound good, but then they sell you out down the road. And so reaching out to the Latino community, I think, is a huge effort. We don't do a good job with women, but I think in Montgomery County we've got a lot of great women's clubs, and I think that we can push things forward through them. The really tough nut to crack, the other demographic that we're doing a really poor job with, is the under 29, I believe, demographic. And the reason I say that's a tough nut to crack is because, one of the things that in my background, I spent a lot of time in. My background is in biblical counseling. I spent a lot of time in the ministry, and during my course studies, I did an essay on humanism and the advancement of humanism in America. And back in the 80s, and I've got some material on this, there was a concerted effort to say, we are going to go into the institutions of learning, whether that's primary, whether that's your higher education, and we're going to get control of your kids. We're going to make a push for the minds of your kids, and we're going to and this isn't their words, but
we've seen that up there, for instance, when they brought in the drag queen to teach the kids how to apply makeup properly. And Dale Inman was behind that. Are you aware of that controversy?
I'm aware of that. I don't know if you know, but there was another person that came out. I think they were with Conroe ISD, but he basically said what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
He said, your kids are not yours.
Yeah, they belong
to the government. To the government as well. And so that mentality's been going on, that indoctrination, that effort to get a hold of our kids has been going on for the last almost 4 decades. And what you're starting to see is the fruits of that. And I think that particular thing can be turned around, although that's a longer game. But I do have an answer for that. If you look at the number of evangelicals that turn out to vote, it's about 10%. It's a really sad number.
This is the failure of the church, though. I mean, the church is essentially worthless in the modern society. They don't do anything really important anymore.
Well,
and I'm all about seeing people get saved, filled with the Holy Ghost, baptized in Jesus' name. I love that. But if you're not affecting your society, if you're not affecting your government, then the salt has lost its savor.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so, I mean,
as your pastor, for instance, gotten up and told people, you as Christians need to get out and vote for your values. Election day is March 3rd. And if you're a member of this church, I expect you to be there.
Actually, we did. So one of the he's sort of an honorary pastor. His name is Dr. Joe Wall. He fills in periodically, and probably about a month ago, he talked to the church about the importance of getting out and vote. And he rattles through the
get a bell for that one.
Yeah, and he rattles through the different issues that come up that again define the parties. And it's a very simple winnowing process. Like if you look at these values over here, it steers you toward a certain party. If you look at these values over here, it steers you toward a different party. So he has no qualms about doing that. He's got literature in our foyer about getting out and participating in the political process. And so, but we need more of that. And I know of a gentleman that's actually in our county. He's going around. He's trying to organize our youth and working with our churches to try to move that ball forward. And so, again, Lord willing, if I'm elected into that position, I'm going to foster those activities because I think we can make a dent in that demographic by reaching out to the youth in our churches and trying to get them off the pew, so to speak.
Well, we've got 3 minutes. One of the questions was, which Hispanic organizations are you working with?
So I can't recall the name of the Hispanic organizations, but it was some conversations that I had at one of the Republican women's clubs. It was with 2 ladies there, and I'll be going back and talking to them. But I can't remember the name of the initiative.
We know the name of the women.
She's going to hate me because I don't remember the name. I just have been meeting so many people on the
Well,
campaign
Jen
trail.
Lowe and Bianca Gracia come to mind, but there are others, I know.
No, I can tell. I know which club they were with, but it all just blurs together. So, apologize if you're watching and that I can't remember. But I know which club they're plugged into, and I know how to reach back out to them.
Well, it does matter. We've got to make some major gains, and we haven't been. In Montgomery County, certainly the Republican Party of Montgomery County has done better than the Republican Party of Harris County, which is why we got Keith Nielsen on deck coming up next. We're to talk about that. But in my never to be humbled opinion, Paul Simpson has utterly let us down and failed as the chairman of the Republican Party. I don't want to see the same thing happen up there, but it does look like right now, as one person pointed out, why are there 2 Republican parties in Harris County? I mean, in Montgomery County. So apparently there's still a lot of division on this issue.
Yeah, I like I said earlier.
Should there be term limits for a county chair?
So the term limits things is a tough question because we have term limits. I tend to like them, but again, one of our elected officials said, well, we kind of already have term limits. The voters get to choose who's in there and who's out. And
that's supposed to be term limits, but we've seen how ineffective that has been, partially going back to the fact that so few people actually turn out to vote. Yeah. I mean, here in Harris County, for instance, voting for mayor, 50,000 registered Republicans did not vote. And that's how we lose, But in any case, Brian Christ, I want to thank you for taking the time to drive down here and be a part of the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
So on that note, guys, got to pay some bills. Be right back. Bacon Master said that Pastor Joe Wall is the bomb. So I'm glad to hear that. We'll be right back on Right Side of the Mic. Do not go away.